Hey, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. This has become one of my favorite videos. It's where I discover my top reads from last year, but in a tournament style, which means that some of my favorites actually may go head-to-head against one another, and it makes choosing painful sometimes. But I've already gone through 2 rounds. I started with 70-odd books, and in the first round, we had a couple of difficult choices. One of those was The Tainted Cup versus The Goblin Emperor, and I ended up choosing The Tainted Cup, but The Goblin Emperor is one of those books that I have heard for years that is great and finally read and agree. The other matchup that was difficult was A Sorceress Comes to Call by T. Kingfisher versus Archangel, and I actually went with Archangel in this one because the characters in the plot and like the story itself, I think stuck with me more. I thought about them a lot more, which isn't to say I didn't think about Cordelia in A Sorceress Comes to Call and how kind of horrible, creepy that was, but Archangel, it's the first in a disjointed series, and it really hooked me to want to read the rest. Okay, so those were the hard ones in round 1. In round 2, we had some other hard decisions, such as The Dogs of War by Adrian Tchaikovsky versus The Helm of Midnight. I had to really stare at that one for a second, and the point is to try to do like quicker snap decisions, and I went with The Dogs of War because I thought about Rex for days after I finished reading that book, and it's quite short. The Helm of Midnight is an epic fantasy where there's cool things the story does with time, with the timeline. There are ways to imbue magic into objects, and a big question is, do only objects have magic, or can people have magic too? But the overarching plot is that there are these death masks that people have made when they have this wonderful skill that people may want to pass on, and a death mask was made intentionally of a serial killer embodying like their spirit and emotions and murdery skills, and it gets stolen, and then similar murders start arising that need to be investigated. Other really hard decision was Wolfskin versus Empire of Silence. I had to go with Wolfskin on that one. Empire of Silence I recently finished. It's the first book in a space opera, but Wolfskin is by Juliet Marillier, and it just hit me really hard with the characters and how they face the challenges before them and the interpersonal conflicts that they have. It's Juliet Marillier. So now we're going into round 3, which is The Sweet 16. Again, this is not a judgment on which book is better than another. I may pick it because I enjoyed it more, or something about it lingered with me more than another one. But at this point in the list, all of these books are pretty much top contenders. I obviously enjoyed them all, and I imagine it's going to be really hard to pick. Okay, so Sweet 16, the first pair, Arrows Fall, which is the 3rd book in the Arrows trilogy by Mercedes Lackey, is going against The Liar's Knot, the 2nd book in the Rook and the Rose trilogy, which I think was my favorite series that I read this year. I read all 3 books in that trilogy within 2 or 3 months. And it was my favorite installment of that trilogy, and I have to go with The Liar's Knot for this, because it's where some questions start getting answered, but it's book 2 out of 3. It did not have middle book syndrome. You really start to explore more of the characters' backstories, and the plot and the conflicts with the magic system really start to deepen, and it really ratcheted up the interest in the story. So that one, gotta go with The Liar's Knot. Okay. The Liar's Knot. The next pairing is Emily Wilde's Map of the Other Lands, the 2nd book in the Emily Wilde trilogy, versus The Bound Lands by Megan O'Keefe, which is the 3rd book in this trilogy that I don't have because I lent it to my dad. And if I'm being honest, I really liked book 1 more than book 2 and 3 in that trilogy, although I think the world building was very, very imaginative. I'm gonna go with Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands for this choice because, again, even though this is book 2 of 3, it did not have middle book syndrome. The adventure that Emily went on in search of her pursuit of like fairy knowledge, it went in a way that I didn't expect, and it made me excited for the 3rd book, which is coming out quite soon. This next pairing, I don't have either in physical form. So random. Thrown in the Dark, which is a fantasy romance, or Alien Clay, which is Adrian Tchaikovsky's newest science fiction. Okay, Thrown in the Dark. I haven't liked much of the romantasy that I've been reading lately. I think that what is being marketed as romantasy is not actually what I want in either fantasy or romance, but Thrown in the Dark is independently published, and this book just made me laugh out loud as I was listening to it. It was one of those books where I wanted to keep listening to it, so I came up with things to do around the house just so I could just keep listening to it. Versus Alien Clay, which is a standalone sci-fi with really political overtones about this person who is kind of thrown into political prison, sent to be a laborer, basically on a prison planet. It's a one-way trip because of the relative time and space travel, but the planet itself is trying to kill them, or so it seems, and so the main character is trying to survive working on this planet, learning more about its secrets, and also surviving just the encampment itself and kind of the politics that are continuing to haunt them. Oh, this one's really hard. I think Alien Clay, though. Next is The Dogs of War versus The Tainted Cup. The Dogs of War, again, is by Adrian Tchaikovsky. It is the first, I think, in a duology that is following these super soldiers, except for, like, the squad of soldiers are these somehow merging animal, reptilian, non-human bodies with these super soldiers. And the main character is Rex, and he just wants to be a good soldier, wants to obey Master, but what happens if Master is not good? Versus The Tainted Cup by Robert Jackson Bennett, pitched as Watson and Holmes-esque investigation with quirky characters and a really, really cool biological, biohacking, speculative fiction setting, and I'm going to have to go with The Tainted Cup. The next one, another quite random pairing, Trials of Empire by Richard Swan, which is the third book in the Empire of the Wolf trilogy. I thought this was a great conclusion to the trilogy. I felt exhausted when I finished reading it. And I think Justice of Kings, which was book one, won this tournament 2 years ago. Versus Arrow's Flight, which is the second book in the Arrows trilogy by Mercedes Lackey. I have to go with Empire, with Trials of Empire. The way that this trilogy was concluded, especially with the crescendo that was how the magic system impacted everything. It got very dark. There was necromancy. There was so much character development and intercharacter conflict. How far will you go to save the people or the institutions that you care about? What is worth just ripping down and starting all over? So, the Trials of Empire. Another really difficult one, Wolfskin by Julia Marillier versus Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wong. I have recommended Blood Over Brighthaven to so many people. People have said it's like a magic school story, but it's really not. It's like what happens when you graduate magic school and you're starting a magic job, except it's following a woman who is one of the only female kind of magicians, how the magic system works in this city, gets this very coveted position and gets assigned a very hard task, but there are those working around her who are trying to sabotage that because she's a woman, and also is following another character who is coming from a portion of society that it's discriminated against. They come from outside the protective walls of the city and tend to do more menial jobs. The magician ends up hiring him to be her lab assistant. Well, he was assigned her lab assistant as a joke, but then she keeps him on and she starts teaching him, and then together they start unlocking a mystery of this magic. I think it was a very impactful book, but Wolfskin impacted me more. Next is A House with Good Bones, which is a horror by T. Kingfisher, versus Arrows of the Queen by Mercedes Lackey. So we finally have gotten to the first book in the Arrows trilogy. I'm gonna pick Arrows Queen this time. I thought that Arrows of the Queen was so wholesome. It follows this main character, Talia, who has grown up in a rather abusive society, gets selected by a mythical companion to become a herald, which are a group of people that serve the monarchy of Valdemar and, the very high ideal And she is trying to heal from this past that she's come from and learn to trust that the people around her really have her best interests at heart. And it was extremely wholesome, like this portion of Talia's story, because in the latter two books, she really faces some challenges and some dark things. But this first book, I thought was a great introduction to this whole Herald companion system and was just a very comforting read. Then the last in the Sweet 16 is The Fall of Waterstone, which I thought was the second in a duology, but it's actually the second in the trilogy of the Blacklands Bane, versus Archangel by Sharon Shin. What I really love about The Fall of Waterstone and this and these books, which begin with A Flame of the North, Norse-inspired epic fantasy that very much feel Lord of the Rings inspired as far as the mythic nature of the writing. It's very poetic. The naming conventions, like, it very much evokes the Lord of the Rings, but the story is quite different. It follows a woman who is like a sorceress, a highly valued member of her clan. Once, when her brother does something foolish with some outsiders that are visiting the clan, she basically gets sent away to live with these outsiders for a year and a day as a wereguild. It's like an honor thing, and ends up going north with them, but soon learns that maybe they kind of were looking for her because there's this bigger old ancient evil that is starting to awaken. Versus Archangel, which I do need to get a physical copy of. But I think for this selection, I'm actually going to go with The Fall of Waterstone. We got some really good character development and plot development, and how the main character is facing not only the obstacles before her and like the dark magic and trying to use this object. It's like been foretold that someone with her abilities, if they have this object, they can like defeat the evil one, but it takes a huge toll on her. So not only is she trying to contemplate and come to grips with that, but she also still feels kind of used by the people that she traveled to the north with. So there's like that sort of interpersonal stuff going on, and it has a lot to do with honor with her companions. And there's just, it's complicated, and I wish that more people would read these books. So now we're on to the top 8. I'm not going to hold up the books this time just because it takes a little bit longer. Since I've already kind of said a little bit about what the books are about, this is going to be more, once I see the pairing, I need to pick one, because otherwise I'll sit here and deliberate. We have The Liar's Knot versus Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherland. It's going to The Liar's Knot. Alien Clay versus The Tainted Cup is going to The Tainted Cup. The Trials of Empire versus Wolfskin. This is what I'm talking about with hard decisions. Wolfskin. Heirs of the Queen versus The Fall of Waterstone is going to The Fall of Waterstone. Okay, I had to make sure I had these right. So, final four. The Tainted Cup versus The Liar's Knot. The Liar's Knot. This one actually feels easy. Wolfskin versus The Fall of Waterstone. Wolfskin. The top 2 books, and the books that I have to choose from for the final, for the championship of 2024, is The Liar's Knot, Book 2 of Work and Rose, versus Wolfskin by Juliet Marillier. And really, my heart is singing to me, it's Wolfskin. I highly recommend that you read the Rook and Rose trilogy by M.A. Carrick. It begins with Mask of Mirrors. It's a Venetian-inspired epic fantasy that is about con artists, basically. The main character, Renata, was kind of a street urchin who had to flee the city when she was a youth, and she comes back with her adopted sister, and they're trying to do a con. She is trying to trick one of the noble houses into thinking that she is like an exiled member of that house, and her adopted sister is like her maid, and she gets wrapped up in some other plotting with another character, Vargo, who is on the rise. He is kind of a crime lord in the city, but he's trying to go straight in the sense of getting power. And then they also clash with a character who is from this city, Nadezhra. He is from an outside group of people that has often been looked down upon because Nadezhra is like a colonized city. There are conflicting magics and cultures going on, and he is actually a hawk. He's in the police force. He is trying to like fix it from within because he feels as though there is prejudice against his people, and as in a sense the colonizers in that culture and society and that magic are the privileged ones, and he doesn't want, you know, his people to be taken advantage of. And meanwhile, while all three of them are doing their different antics, there is a masked vigilante, the Rook, whose goal is to like save the city, but from what? That's where it gets really complicated with like the magic system, and it's a really, really, really great trilogy. Wolfskin is the first book in a duology that I haven't even finished yet. I haven't read Fox Mask, that's the next one, but I've spoken about Wolfskin in several videos. It follows this man, Eyvind, starting out when he's a boy. It's Norse inspired as well. All Eyvind has ever wanted is to be a wolfskin, like chosen by Thor to be one of his vaunted warriors. When the chieftain that Eyvind serves goes off to make a settlement on this island, Eyvind is one of his protectors, goes with him. Another person that goes with him is a kinsman of this leader. He was a very odd person. Eyvind and this boy befriended each other as children, kind of like no one knew what else to do with this kid, and they're like, Eyvind, you know, teach him how to be a boy and fight and play, and they ended up swearing like a blood oath to always be loyal to one another. So there's that going on, but now that they're at the settlement, they encounter the people who live there. Although they all are striving for peace, Eyvind's people are better armed, they're better armored, and soon, despite the treaty that they have for peace, things start going wrong on the settlement. The king of the folk who already live there, his niece is like their priestess, and she carries out a lot of the rituals and honors their goddess, and she is trying to like help foster peace between these two groups as things are going horribly, horribly wrong. In the middle of that is Eyvind and his warring loyalties between peace and the vision of his leader and this priestess person who he's growing close to, and his vow to his blood brother and his ambition, and it's kind of like tearing him apart. It was very, very good, and I need to read Fox Mask very soon. So you have it. Wolfskin is my top book for the year, followed by The Liar's Knot, or basically the entire Rook and Rose series by M.A. Carrick. I hope that you enjoyed this video. I find it very fun. It's not just a tier rank. It's kind of all over the place because books that I love may come up against one another, and you really have to sort of think, like, of these, what stuck with me the most? Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you enjoyed this video. Please tell me what your very favorite top book of 2024 is in the comments below. And as always, don't forget to support your local library. Thanks.